I'd like to start by saying, long live George Floyd. You have inspired me to be a better human being, a better husband, a better son, a better brother, a better friend, and last but not least, a better activist. After his murder and the events that followed, I made 3 promises. One being that I would do my best to make sure his death was not in vain. 2, I would hold Michael Griffin accountable for his hateful acts against Paco Lopez. And lastly, I would see to it that vulnerable people in our community would be protected from people of hate. On June 5th of last year, I stood underneath this gazebo and began to highlight the lack of protections for people of color in this state. Shortly after, I began working with state and local leaders to address this problem through policy. It is important that you all know that activists are capable of more than just marching in the street. We too are capable of turning the wheels of systemic change. We always have been. Just look to Martin Luther King. Over the past 6 to 7 months, we worked to draft House Bill 1443. When the bill failed, I worked alongside Commissioner Preston and others to bring about the hate crime ordinance you guys have now started to report about. I would like to give credit to Maura Ferguson from the High Plains Fair Housing for the immense amount of work that she put in over this time to see that dream come to fruition. Last week, while meeting with city leaders regarding the ordinance, I suggested we meet with representatives from the state's attorney's office to ensure that the added penalty of the bias crime or hate crime ordinance would not be problematic. We met with them and discussed details of the ordinance and requested follow-up and feedback. This morning, we would receive earth-shattering news. In 1973, North Dakota enacted Century Code 12.01-14-04 titled Discrimination in Public Places. I'm going to take a few seconds to read the Century Code. The Century Code goes as follows. A person is guilty of a Class B misdemeanor if, whether or not acting under color of law, he by force or threat of force or by economic coercion intentionally injures, intimidates, or interferes with another because of his sex, race, color, religion, or national origin, and because he is or has been exercising or attempting to exercise his right to full and equal enjoyment of any facility open to public, injures, intimidates, or interferes with another because of his sex, race, color, religion, or national origin in order to intimidate him or any person from exercising or attempting to exercise his right to full and equal enjoyment of any facility open to the public. What I just read to you is the fact that since 1973, our state of North Dakota has already had a hate crime law in place across this state. According to FBI hate crime data, in 2012, North Dakota ranked second in the entire country in hate crime per 100,000 residents. In 2013, we topped that and ranked first in the entire country in hate crimes per 100,000 residents. In 2014, we ranked second. And in 2015, we again ranked second. Despite these staggering numbers, no one in this state, from our politicians to our law enforcement officials to our attorney's office, was aware of this century code up until now. From what we can surmise, in the 47 years of its existence, no one has ever been charged with a crime under this hate crime century code. When we look across this country and we see our Asian community under attack, our BIPOC community, our LGBT community, and even our disabled community facing hate, it is a must that we all take part in condemning these acts, but also prosecuting them to the fullest extent of the law. While I may be concerned with how it could be possible that we could have a hate crime law and no one in 47 years get prosecuted under that law, despite our state showing staggering numbers of hate crimes in existence, I am more concerned with what we do with this information and how we move forward. How will our institutions gather together to put together a plan to correct this injustice? Additionally, I am also concerned because the ordinance, or not the ordinance, but the Century Code does not include protections for our LGBTQ plus community, nor does it include protections for the disabled. So I would like to see that they be added as a protected class. Additionally, with the ordinance that Arlette Preston and others, like myself, has put together, I'm not sure if they will continue to move forward with the added penalty piece, but there is also a piece that would require Fargo PD to do a better job and set better standards in collecting hate crime data and hate crimes when they're reported. From last that I could understand, Deputy Chief Joe Anderson stated there was no formal process. He stated that when a hate crime was reported, a supervisor would then alert it, and that supervisor would then make a decision on whether this should be logged as a hate crime or not. When the numbers started to decrease dramatically beginning in 2016, on the back of Donald Trump being elected as president, on the back of the hate climate in this country increasing dramatically, the Fargo Forum did a little bit of investigating, and they found 7 potential hate crimes that happened and were most likely not reported or included within the decreasing numbers. So there's definitely places where we can improve with this. It's sad to hear that we have a hate crime law and that no one has ever been charged with it. Again, it goes to show our lack of a response when it comes to dealing with hate within this community, because it does exist. My hope is that with this information, our city, our state, our leaders will do more to take this seriously. Our law enforcement bodies, our state's attorney's office will be, I'm glad that they were forthcoming with revealing that this century code exists. Now the expectation should be that they actually use it, considering that hate crimes are being reported. People should definitely be charged with a hate crime when they commit one, and they should be held to the full extent of the law. The climate in this country as far as hate crimes is only increasing. 8 people shot dead in Atlanta. The Asian community is under attack. The BIPOC community has continued to be under attack. Our LGBT community, especially our trans women, have continued to be under attack. It is time that we send a strong message across the state of North Dakota that hate will not be tolerated. And that's not just with policy. That's with our words. That's with our governor. That's with our senators. That's with our mayors. All coming forward, our council people, everyone coming forward and saying, as a community, as a state, we will not tolerate hate. We have not done a good job of that so far. And it is now time that we do that. I want to be clear. I am not painting this state as a hateful state. I am simply revealing what is there and has not come to light. I've lived in Fargo for going on 15 years. I love this community. I put my life behind it. I put my physical health behind it. I put my mental health behind it. I put my financial health behind improving this community. I hope that you all can see that with my actions. I simply just want to see accountability. I simply just want to see equity for those that are marginalized. And I want to see us be protected from hateful acts. I want to see our leaders condemn hate. I want to feel like I can walk around this city and in this state without having to look over my shoulders. I have yet to be able to do that. There are many people in our community that have yet to be able to do that. Our new Americans suffer massive amounts of persecution. In 2015, 3 Somali women in the Walmart parking lot were told by a white woman that she wanted to kill all of them, and no action was taken. Someone had their nose bit off in the state of North Dakota in an apparent hate crime. We have not done a good job. The numbers have reflected that hate is in our state, and we have not done a good job of doing anything about it. And now that this is out here, I'm hoping that we can change that, and now I'll be open for any questions.
Who discovered the law in the books, and who gave you this information?
It was directly from representatives within the state's attorney's office.
Here in Cass County?
Yes, here in Cass County, here in Fargo. I'm not too familiar between counties, but yes, the state's attorney's office under Birch Burdick.
Were they also surprised by their findings?
Yes, because when you think about it, Ruth Buffalo, Representative Buffalo, previously attempted, 2019, tried to pass hate crime legislation, tried again this last time. I'm assuming that there was, being a part of the second process, we did a ton of research as far as putting this together, but I'd like to assume the Legislative Council did research to look to see if this was something that was on the books, and
so the hate crime legislation usually it's like a tack on to a crime, and it adds more time, more seriousness to the actual crime itself. Is it the same with this Century Code?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So if someone was to assault someone, but then it turned out to be a hate crime, that would be the assault charge plus a hate crime.
The misdemeanor, correct.
Okay.
So I'm not necessarily, they added on, but from speaking to the state's attorney's office, when they look at added penalties, they viewed it more as a bargaining chip. So and hate crimes traditionally are harder to prove, so they would basically use it as a chip to get the person to plead to the simple assault charge instead of, targeting them with both.
But as is, it still does not protect the LGBT community
It does
or
not.
the disabled.
It does not, correct.
Have you done any research, or has anyone done any research? Obviously, this was this came up for a reason back then. Who sponsored it, and how did it come about, and why?
This was in 1973. I was sent a document that has 100+ pages. I haven't reviewed it into detail just yet. This is something that is very startling. And with this coming forward, I do believe that there are a lot of unanswered questions that definitely need to be answered.
Does it do enough? Have you read the penalties for it?
It's a misdemeanor.
Right.
And you know what? To be honest with you, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, I wasn't hopeful that. I mean, we failed miserably in getting the House bill passed. So we had no protection across the state. So to wake up this morning and find out that there actually is protection, and it's just on our institutions to do something about it to make that visible, we couldn't be better off from where we were yesterday.
How can people in the community ensure that city officials just make sure that these hate crimes aren't flying under the radar?
You know what? I've been very adamant and passionate that people show up to these commission meetings, that they engage their city officials, they hold them accountable. This is why we vote for them, is for them to speak on our behalf, to work in our best interest. So in engaging our city officials, engaging our state officials to let them know, hey, this is important to me. Can you please ensure that this is also a priority for you as well? Because if we don't speak about it, then nothing is heard and nothing is done beyond that. And knowing that this now exists, this is why I'm coming to you guys, because I want to make sure that this does have massive and maximum visibility. It's astounding that this actually exists, and for 40 plus years, no one has used it, and not just used it, but the people who are supposed to know our law was unaware of an existence of a law that could be so critical within a climate in which it can play such an important role. I'll be honest with you, I've received multiple death threats in my time of advocating for equality. And when I look at this policy and the policy we were trying to create before this policy existed, I viewed the policy we were trying to put into place as a barrier between me and people of hate, thinking that if this was in place, if we could just get this in place, when people of hate think about committing a hateful act, this message, this law will discourage them from doing so. And so now knowing that we actually have something in place, it makes me feel a little bit more comfortable, as long as we can bring the visibility and let people know that this is here, it is a tool, and our officials will be willing to use it against anyone who might try and perform a hateful act within our community.
Now, when you say it's never been used, is that just here in Cass County, or is
No,
that statewide?
across the state. From what I understand, and this is information that's come directly from the state's attorney's office, this is kind of preliminary, but in the preliminary search that they've done so far, they have yet to find a single case in which somebody was charged under the Century Code for a hate crime.
Any idea how this flew under the radar for 40 years?
I guess your guess is just as good as mine, but I just don't think that in this state we've traditionally taken acts of hate as serious. We've minimized them. We truly have. Our response to hateful acts have been minimized. When you go back to May 30th of last year, and you go back to Michael Griffin striking Paco Lopez with a vehicle and carrying him for 3 blocks. Everyone spoke about the riots, but not one person came out to say what Michael Griffin did was wrong and would not be tolerated within our community. Our response has been lackadaisical, and we thought it was just with our city leaders, but we're now learning that it's also within other institutions as well for something like this to exist, and for no one to absolutely know about it is just, I've been trying to wrap my mind around this all morning, and I have yet to be able to actually process how this could be possible, considering the data that I've been able to uncover regarding hate crimes per capita within our state. For us to be battling Mississippi in hate crimes per capita is astounding in itself. For us to rank so highly consistently over time across the country in hate crimes per capita is astounding. I've been working on this legislation for months, and it was just a whim in my mind that said, do some more research. And I'd like to thank the forum, because it was the forum's articles back during 2013, 2014, 2015 that was saying, like, North Dakota's ranking really high in hate crime. And no one was really paying attention to it. And so seeing those breadcrumbs allowed me to go to look for additional data and see that this was really a problem. I thought the data didn't exist. It was there the entire time. No one really cared to go and pull it up and say this is a problem and actually do anything about it.
Here's another one to wrap your mind around maybe, but this law has been in effect for 40 some years or whatever, and yet multiple times during the state legislature recently, the attempts to create a hate crime law to protect everybody, including LGBT and the disabled, have been just soundly defeated multiple times. And yet 40 years ago, we made such a law,
Right.
perhaps, and what do you think happened there somewhere in this time span?
You know, when you think back, this was enacted in 1973. You go back you're talking about when the civil rights movement was at its peak, pretty much. And you constantly hear, well, what are these activists complaining about? We've moved forward in our thinking. In 1973, our state was in agreement that our people needed protections. This was a problem. We wanted to make sure our people was protected. Fast forward 40 plus years, and we're dealing with a pretty hateful climate, and our city leaders and our state leaders don't believe it to be so. So have we really moved forward in thinking, or have we moved forward backwards? I'd like to thank our state leaders back in 1973 for foreshadowing and seeing what was necessary and doing what needed to be done, because where we currently are in this state, it seems to be impossible to get that done. The way the House bill was defeated, the way that it was treated as a joke on the House floor was an embarrassment. It was compared to Polish jokes and Armenian jokes. They did not take it seriously. But I'm glad that this is in place, and I'm praying and hoping that our state's attorney's office is going to work with our law enforcement officials to make sure that they can right this injustice and get this right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So I'm assuming the county attorney thinks that it's still enforceable.
I mean, it's in
on the
law.
book, yeah.
It's up
Okay.
to them to enforce.
Yeah, I just didn't know if there was weird wording or something that they're like, oh, well, this word's, we don't word laws this way anymore, so.
That was one of the things that we